A few years into my business career, a friend of mine from my class at school exited a big international investment bank. But he didn't exit like a normal exit. He wrote his resignation letter into the New York Times, and there he laid bare his disgust at the lack of integrity and morality of the place that he worked in. The toxic environment where profit motives were put ahead of clients' best interests, where clients' ignorance was taken advantage of, an environment which he could no longer work in and no longer exist in. And he resigned with a bang. It caused quite a stir. But what bothered me about that letter was not the details of what he wrote about that investment bank. They were disturbing, but they were familiar. They were the world I'd come to know. It was the world of business. A world built by people whose motive is profit, who don't see that blessing is what you need most in your life to succeed. And therefore the lines of morality are quickly swayed, and for sure in every transaction, their best interest is at the forefront of every single thing that they do. That didn't surprise me. In fact, I'm sure that bank did not lose one customer from the article that went out. People understand that that's the business environment. What surprised me about the letter was his naivety. What did he think? That he was going into a world that was cozy, moral, where integrity pervaded everything, clients' interests were put first. I'd been back from yeshiva a few years, and that naivety, that mimistic outview on life had been shaped and changed very quickly. That doesn't mean you have to behave the way others behave in business, but you have to know that what you're going into is a melting pot of tremendous challenge and upheaval to the things which you hold dear and the values which our Torah wants. And you have to know as a Ben Torah how to engage with that. It bothered me. Why does Hashem want me to deal with this? It was so much better in yeshiva days. When I was in Koilel, such a pure, beautiful, ruchni environment. And now I have to come into the schmutz. Surely not. And how do I deal with the schmutz? How do I deal with it and come out still a Ben Torah with some semblance of connection and desire to grow as a yid in connection to Torah and to learning? How do you survive it? These questions churned in my head. And there were many times through my career where I wanted to get involved in something which I would consider kadosh, more kadosh, build a school, start another shir. And the hashgacha in my life, not always, but at some key moments, thrust me deeper into this business world. And I couldn't understand why. Why, Hashem? Why don't you want me to build you another school? Why don't you want me to write a book, start another shir? You want me to be deeper and deeper into this world. Why? Why would you want that from me? I don't get it. And I began to think. And my thoughts led me to Yaakov Avinu. Could you imagine? The Torah says, Yaakov was an ish tam yoshev ohalim. He was a pure man sitting in tents. What was he doing in those tents? We all know. Tam. Eino baki b'chol eile. He wasn't an expert in all the things that Asaf was an expert in deceit. Kelibo kain piv. His heart and his mouth spoke the same words. Mi she'eino charif l'ramois koroi tam. Somebody who's not sharp at deceiving is a clumsy deceiver. He's called Tam. That was Yaakov. Truthful. What he thought, what he felt, that's all he could express on his lips. Nothing different. Yoshev Ahalim, says Rashi. Oile shel Shem ve'oile shel Eva. He was sitting in the tents of Shem and Eva. Never budged, steeped in learning all his days. And yet Hashem orchestrated his life, picked him up by his ear, and made the hashgacha in his life that he would end up working 21 years for Lavan. Not for any old businessman. Not just 21 years in business. 21 years with a crook. A deceitful crook. This pure yeshiva bocha. Ish tam, he only knew how to speak what was true, what was right, what was straight. He was sitting and learning, got thrust out of that into that world. And Hashem chose that for Yaakov's journey in Avodas Hashem, because at that stage in his life, that was more crucial for his growth and his development in his relationship with Hashem than to continue sitting b'oile Shem, b'oile Eva. He had to be engaged in the shmutz, engaged with this man and learned how to deal with him and learn how to succeed with him in every way. Succeed financially and leave there unstained. As the Pasuk says, that Yaakov sent his servants to tell Asaf at the end of his 21 years with Lavan, go and tell them, Vaytzavusam leimor, Koi toimrum la'adoni Asaf, go tell Asaf the following, Koi omar avdecha Yaakov, the following your servant Yaakov said to you, has sent the following message, Im Lavan garti va'eichar ad alta, I've been living with Lavan until this time. Rashi says, what did he tell him when he told him, Im Lavan garti? Garti begematria taryag. The word Garti in gematria is 613. Kloima, what was he telling Asaf? Im Lavan harosha Garti. I lived with this evil man, Rosha. Lived in his house, worked in his business. V'taryag mitzvah shamarti. And I kept every single mitzvah of the Torah. V'lo lamadati mima'asav harayim. And I never learned from his actions at all. That was the avodah of Yaakov. And that was more valuable to Hashem at that stage in Yaakov's life than remaining in the base medrash of Shem ve'Eva. The same thing happened to David HaMelech. In Tehillim Chof Gimel, David HaMelech describes his journey from being a young shepherd of his father's sheep to becoming king of Klal Yisrael. Listen to the incredible words of the Malbim, how he describes through the words of the Tehillim, David HaMelech's perception of what was happening to him at that time. He says as follows, Mizmor LeDavid. B'mizmor hazeh, chorat es koroisav ma'ase yoyse roye tzoin b'midbar ad she'ala lemelucha. In this Tehillim, David HaMelech engraves what happened to him from the time that he was a shepherd of sheep in the desert until he became king. At first he starts looking at the beginning of his years. At the time when he was alone with the sheep in the desert. He compares himself to a sheep who was pasturing in beautiful, luscious pastures. And he compares Hashem to the shepherd who was overseeing his life with a compassionate eye. Hashanim ha'ele haim hayu etzloi mivchar yamei chayav. Those years were David HaMelech's choice years. Ba'oid his boideid im koinoi, while he was alone with his Creator. Ba'oid yezameh lefanav al higyoin b'chino noim zmiras Yisrael, while he would sing songs on his harp, songs of Klal Yisrael. Tell him. Ba'oid lo notal alav keter ha'melucha l'hafridoi min ha'dveikus im Hashem. All the while that the crown of kingship had not yet been placed on his head that would separate him from this incredible intensity and cleaving to God. Ki hazman hazeh haya hazman ha'meushar etzloi. This is the happiest time in David HaMelech's life. U'ba'asher haya ritzoin Hashem. But it was the will of Hashem. Lehoitzioi mechaye ha'izboidedos lirois tzoin amoi. To take him out of that life of solitude into a life of herding and shepherding Hashem's sheep, Hashem's children. And then he goes on to explain what happened to him, and he says, all that happened to David HaMelech was Hashem's hashgacha to ensure that David HaMelech would succeed in becoming king. That wasn't what David wanted. He didn't want to be the king. He didn't want to be in the shmutz. He didn't want to be in war. He didn't want to be paskin in nidashailas. He wanted to be alone in dveikus with Hashem. He wanted more than anything that life of solitude alone with God. And he mentions all the time those times, those months which were much better in his eyes than the time when he was king over Israel. An incredible thing. David HaMelech, he also wanted dveikus, ruchnius in its pure form. And Hashem said, that's not what I want for you. I want you to be king of Israel, with all that comes with it. Wars, battles, murder, difficulties, revolts, children rebelling against you. Because that has more value to me for your life than a life of pure spirituality. And that's the life that Hashem's chosen for you and me. And He sees tremendous value in it, like He saw in it for Yaakov, and He saw in it for David HaMelech. Provided that we can engage in a world which is so contrary to our values, built with such different aspirations to ours that we got through our Torah. But to survive in that world and thrive in that world, both financially and spiritually, is the most incredible journey for us to journey, and it's the one that Hashem wants you and I to make. What tools do we need to make sure that that journey is one which we come out shining and not tarnished? Those are the tools I'd like to share with you in the upcoming shiurim.